Um, Thank you, Shishya. Thank you, Mr. Salim Thomas, Dr. Salim Thomas, and Omna Thomas, Commodore Ravindranath for having made it possible for me to come here, and the parents, the trustees, the students up there, and all our good friends from the Satsang Foundation and outside the Satsang Foundation who are here. Thank you very much. I appreciate that I'm standing in the podium where many important speakers must have spoken. So the subject given to me is spirituality and education. It's a very important subject, and at the same time something which we should look at very carefully. Now, when I say spirituality, now this is the subject, spirituality, education. So let's look at spirituality and then look at education and then bring them together to see what's the link, or is there a link at all. So I'll start with spiritual. People call me an educationist, but I think really there is not much difference between spiritual and temporal education. They're just two sides of the same coin. So let me start with spiritual. Now, when I say spiritual, please understand that it need not concern any particular religion. I believe, and it is my experience, that most religions, I mean all religions, have a spiritual element and the other element, which is the outside rituals and practices and so on. But in the core, there is a spiritual element. Look at all religions. Religions with many books, religions with one book, religions with many teachers, religions with one teacher. Wherever you look, you'll find that the beginning of any religion, there has been somebody, or in the case of India, many bodies, who have had a spiritual experience. I would say a mystical experience. It is from the mystical experience of these individuals that the whole body called religion has grown up and come around. So look everywhere with a magnifying glass, look closely with a microscope, you will see that behind every religion there is definitely an element of spirituality. We'll say mystic experience is spiritual. It's not a material experience. From there, depending on the geographical location and where these particular individuals were born who had the experience, various rules and regulations have been worked out and religions have been created. Fine. The problem is when the outer shell of religion becomes more important than the inner aspect of religion. That's where the problem comes. And also because it's easier to practice the outside than to go within and look at the core. So we tend to do what is easy for us. Because it's like everybody is doing, so I'm also doing. Now when this happens, then generally after a while, the core is lost. And the core, believe me, is same. It's not different. The core of every religion, which is spirituality, comes from the understanding that deep within us, in the core of our consciousness, there is a spark of divinity. If you tell me is this only in Vedanta? No. I'm going to talk about it. In all religions, actually. Now, I was also associated with Jiddu Krishnamurti for some time, J. Krishnamurti. And he had this favorite story about how the outer shell becomes more important than the inner reality. He had a popular story which he used to crack once in a while, like a joke. He said, once the devil and his close friend went for a walk. So the devil, Satan, bent down and picked something from the lawn and put it into his pocket. So his friend asked him, "What did you pick up just now?" Satan said, "I just picked up the truth." So his friend said, "You are the opposite of truth. You're darkness. You're not light. So if you have just picked up the truth and put it in your pocket, your days are numbered. You're going to be finished in no time." So Satan tapped his friend on his shoulder and said, "Don't worry, friend. I'll organize it." Get what I'm trying to say? Even the truth. Of course, I know that you need some organization to run things. I understand. But even if it is the absolute truth, when it gets organized and the outer shell becomes more important than the inner core, and then it's finished. So, to be spiritual is while you are in a situation or in a setup where you have to practice the outer modes of religion, keep the inner thing clear, keep it important, don't let it go off, don't let the devil organize it. If you do that, then no matter which religion we belong to, we can still have keep in touch with the core. Well, in the Indian system of thought, there are so many streams of this going within that most people can hold on to something or the other. Which does not mean that other religions do not have an inner essence, even though there is an outer core which might have become more important. We have to watch on that carefully. In this context of looking at the truth, what is spiritual, what is mystical, is the search for the truth which is the essence of one's being. Anywhere, this is the definition. Now, different people may approach it through different ways. I'm not prepared to agree with Krishnamurti who said there is no path to truth. If you say there is no path to truth, it has become a path already in some way. Anyway, so there are many paths. Because we individuals are made differently. We need to approach the same thing through different ways. Is there an echo coming or are you okay? So what should I do? This is okay? Are you okay now? Yeah, because I thought there was a humming and I was hearing my own voice for a while. I did that. A little more? Okay. Now, yeah. There is a kind of a resounding boom coming when I finish. Anyway, so in this context of the different ways of looking at the same truth, which is spirituality, I want to give you a story which actually comes from ancient Jain sources. You know, Jainism is a very ancient religion. In fact, it's as old as the other streams of Hindu thought, including Vedanta. It's a very old system of thought. Well, you can't call it religion in the usual sense of the term because they don't have a belief in God. There is no creator for them. Of course, they worship Mahavira and all that. But there is no concept of a creator, God. They believe that everything is, like modern scientists say, come out through natural processes. But they believe in the immortality of the soul and that the soul is bound and it has to be released. This is the basic. And they believe that one of the ways of doing that, one of their dictums is ahimsa paramo dharma. non-violence is the essence of Dharma. This is the Jain. I'm not a Jain, but I'm just telling you. Now, they also have a very important philosophy called Anekayetadvad. Beautiful, which means the same thing may be looked at differently by different people. It's a very ancient teaching. Now, one of the great Sufi teachers from Turkey, who founded the famous order of the whirling dervishes, whose name was Jalaluddin Rumi. So beautiful poems written by him called the Masnavi and so on. Sorry. He adapted this story and gave out the popular story that we have today. It comes from ancient Jain sources actually. And because Rumi was a mystic, he did not care where wisdom came from. Here, there, it's okay. Wisdom is wisdom. So he gave the story out in this way. This is the famous story of how three blind men went to figure out what an elephant is. Well, they're blind, okay, they can't see. Unlike many of us who are not blind but cannot see sometimes. Anyway, so um, one blind man, one of them, touched the leg of the elephant, groped, and said, an elephant is like a big pillar, very roughly textured pillar, and we have been warned not to go too near because the pillar might land on our head and we could get crushed. This is his definition of the elephant. The second blind man touched the tail of the elephant and said an elephant is like a, well, in those days there were no bathroom brushes. They said it's like a brush with bristles which moves all the time. If you go too close, you might get hit on your face with those rough bristles. His definition of the elephant. The third man touched the trunk of the elephant and said an elephant is like a hose pipe. I don't think rubber was invented then, but it's like a rubber hose, I'm saying. And it moves constantly. And if you go too close, we have been told that you might end up being caught by it and dashed to the ground. Now this is the definition of an elephant. That was fine, because each blind man was giving out his own definition based on his experience. Problem began when each one insisted that his definition is the right definition. So there was a fight, then it became a fist fight. And there was one of them sitting on the other and trying to strangle him, as it happens today in many places. And then they were on the verge of killing each other when a man who was not blind, someone who could see, walked in and said, just a minute, what is this fight all about? Get up first, dust yourself and tell me why you are fighting. They said, well, an elephant is this, an elephant is... I said, fine. He said, Mr. A is right. So the B said, now what? He said, you are also right. He said, how can that be? C is also right. But then in absolute sense, you are all wrong. Because from your point of view, you're right. No problem about that. From his point of view, he's right. But in the absolute sense, you're wrong because an elephant is much more than you can conceive of because you are blind, you can't see. Now, don't think this is only applicable to the blind. Now, this is where I want to connect. To be truly spiritual and mystical, to understand what spiritual reality is, one has to first realize that we ourselves, even though we can see, we are not like those blind, but we are in a sense because our mind is blinded to certain things. Don't think this is just my theory. It's a very scientific fact that today human beings use just about 20% of their brains, which is enough for our survival. Even to study nuclear physics, it's enough. What about the rest? What about the rest of the elephant, which we don't see? I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. The fact is that the civilization that we have today, and therefore the education that we have today, is based on what I would call the frontal lobe civilization. You see, we have many parts of the brain. I'm sure there are neurologists and doctors here. There are many parts of the brain. There is the old reptilian brain, and there is the new, the cerebrum which has developed, and so on. So there is the frontal lobe which has developed. And all that we see today in front of us in this world is a result of this development. We are asking the question, are there other parts of the brain which have been neglected because this is enough for us to expand? The whole expansion of civilization. If you ask this question, I would like to add a corollary to this. 70 years ago, people thought, even scientists thought, that this little organ in our midbrain, which is called the pineal gland, was a vestige organ. Which means it had no function whatsoever. It was just there, nobody knows, like the vermiform appendix, it's just there, we don't know why it is there, it's a vestige organ. When it gets bad, you need to remove it. You can't remove the pineal, but this was the understanding. Around 60 years ago, they discovered that the pineal gland is a very important ductless endocrine gland in our system because it controls what we call the circadian rhythm, the rhythm of sleeping and waking up. If you have a jet lag, for instance, you go out, you travel in different time zones, you come back and you can't sleep because your time zones have changed, your circadian rhythm has been interfered with. So what does the doctor do? Doctor gives you melatonin to eat. Melatonin is precisely melatonin is precisely the chemical which is introduced into the bloodstream by the pineal gland when you want to sleep. So something is wrong with that supply. So you give melatonin, and then after a couple of days you're fine. Believe me, I know there are a lot of people here who travel with me, who know me, who have traveled with me from different time zones. I don't have a jet lag. You say why? How? Because we know internal ways of recharging the melatonin in the pineal gland. Very simple, I can teach you if you want 5 minutes. You have to bring your checkbooks, of course. I'm joking. So you see, so exploring these mysteries in us of how to understand the deeper, the core of our consciousness, how to understand the deeper layers of our brain. Let's say brain for the time being, because we don't know where the mind is. For the moment, when you say mind, we mean the brain. I don't believe this, but it's like that normally. I think the mind is behind the brain, whatever. But normally when you say mind, it is the brain. So, is there something beyond? Can the mind be unconditioned? From all the prejudices, all the accretions which have come to it over the years. I would also add past births, but I don't want to say that. So that's not a good language in civilized world, past birth. So we leave it there. So at least the past in this life, we are influenced heavily by it. So the way to the spiritual understanding is to learn how to free oneself from these conditionings. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which is a classic text on the science of yoga, which is very closely linked. Don't think that yoga is a Hindu scripture, please. It's non-denominational. Nobody can say that because it is written in Sanskrit. At that time, in this country, Sanskrit was the language of communication. There's no other reason why it was written in Sanskrit. It's one of the important textbooks on yoga, actually the authority on yoga. And yoga is the science by which one goes deep into one's own self and realizes, one, that apart from the body, there is an inner self. The inner self has a lot of potential which normally we don't know about, which can be tapped. Sometimes unconsciously some people have manifestations of this capacity. But here it's a conscious step-by-step movement towards the core. And Patanjali beautifully defines yoga as chitta vritti nirodha. That means the word trying to remove the vrittis or the modifications of the mind stuff which have come to all of us through various ways. And when these modifications are removed and the mind becomes absolutely still and quiet, I won't say thoughtless. It's futile to try to become thoughtless, because when I say I'm thoughtless, I already have a thought. I am thoughtless, it's a thought. It's not that. When the mind has stopped, all fluctuations and distractions of the mind have stopped. When the mind has become quiet, absolutely still, then the mind is no longer a finite little conditioned mind. It's part of this whole system of truth which pervades the entire universe. Upanishad says, Isha Vashyamidam Sarvam, that supreme reality pervades everything here. Now, since we are all human beings, we are born from the wombs of mothers. No, we don't fall from heaven. We all have nose, ears, eyes. We are equal that way. Although you see that different people shine in different fields, and there is a lot of difference in people, although we are all human beings. So, cutting across that difference, if you understand that at the core of your being there is something which is more than the physical, that is spiritual. How is it connected to education? To understand this is education. I do not believe that education is stuffing information into the student's head. You have Google today. Biggest God, G, capital. It even hangs in the Freemasons Hall. G. Now we have Google. You don't have to stuff information. You can go and find out in 2 minutes. Then what is education? It's not stuffing information. It is how to learn to penetrate the different layers of our being and go to the core. Now, education may be useful for it, because then you know how to do it. Once you know how to do it, it's irrelevant after that. You see, there may be 100 medical students. Few of them shine. Why? Because they have started thinking of how to think out of the box. Put things on their head. It's a beautiful chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, the 15th chapter. It begins with Urdhva Moolam Mathashakam, which means there is a tree whose roots are up above and branches down below. We have seen no other tree like that. In our world, the trees have roots down and the branches are up above. But they say there is a tree whose roots are up above and branches down below. Where is this tree? It's the human being. What is the root that controls our whole system? It's here. Up above. Up above, the world so high. And the branches are down below. Everything is controlled from here. So, the attempt in the spiritual research, let us say, is how to understand this core that controls everything. How to go be free from the turmoils of stress and frustrations and distractions that come to the mind, and how to make the mind so clear and quiet that you can touch the core and yet function properly in this world. I think this is a very important part of education. Subjects anybody can study. I mean, you can read, good teachers are required, I understand, who can teach the subject, but the child should be encouraged to think for itself and not say, you're right. Normally what happens, the child in the front, I wouldn't say child, I mean the student, because today I saw a little girl and somebody told me her name and I said, oh, this is little so-and-so. She said, not little, big. So I don't want to say children, I mean students. The norm is, if I ask a question and the guy who sits in the front row gets up and answers the question first, we think that he is the most intelligent. Perhaps in the back row there may be somebody who has not answered the question, who's still thinking about it. We don't let questions settle down, because then the answer that comes may be completely different from the ready-made 1, 2, 3 answer that comes. I think this is how education and spirituality are linked to each other, because as in the spiritual world, education, according to me, from my understanding, is something that grows from within and not something that you throw in, which of course is required for practical purposes. I'm saying when you really want to do something original or creative, then one needs to go to the core and one needs space. Sometimes we are so cramped with information that there is no space for creativity. I don't know if you understand this. I'm sure you do. There was a professor, very learned professor, who went to a Zen master. You know what is Zen, right? In fact, there are lots of people who practice Zen because it is imported, made in Japan. They forget that the Zen, the teachings of Zen, I'm not saying you should remember that always, but it's a fact. Bodhidharma, who was the first teacher of Zen, was from South India, from Tanjore. He introduced a particular form of Buddhism which laid great stress on practical meditation. And then he traveled to China. In fact, he took the art of kalari to China, which later became karate. And when he went to China, he introduced this, which he called Dhyana Buddhism. In the Chinese language, Dhyan became Chan. And when it was then exported, he didn't go to Japan. When it was exported to Japan, Chan became Zen. The same thing. In Malayalam, we have a saying, Muttatte mullekku manamilla. In our own garden, the jasmine doesn't have a good smell. In somebody's garden, it's nice. So, anyway, a professor went to see a Zen master. And he said, Sir, please teach me Zen. Teach me how to attain Satori. Now, Satori is like Nirvana, Samadhi, whatever you want to say in different words, enlightenment. So the Zen master said, sit down. Went inside and got a kettle of tea. And he said, let's have a cup of tea. So the man thought, here I have come for such an important thing, and this guy is wanting to have a cup of tea. Now you can't say no to a Zen master, you might be kicked out. So he kept quiet. So the master, in Japan everything is done with great rituals. So it's nice. He put a cloth on a little table, he kept the kettle, he got the small cups and put them around, and then he took one of the cups and started pouring tea. The cup became full. He continued to pour. So naturally the tea started overflowing from the cup. The professor waited for some time. He thought it was silly, but he waited for some time. Then he said, Sir, the cup is overflowing. And the Zen master turned to him and said, your cup is overflowing. How can I give you Zen? So while information has its place and it is important, I'm not denying that. Inputs are important, but there should be space for things that do not derive from sense perceptions only. When this happens, then one becomes creative. Then one touches the inner core. And the wonderful thing about it is that the human being has almost infinite potential. Usually, this potential is completely rubbed off and conditioned by a certain pattern into which we fall. If we can break that pattern, there are wonderful things happening. You need the pattern, of course. I'm not saying you don't. See, if you need to make an image and you have a clump of clay in your hands which has no shape, you need to make an image. So you have a mold. You press it into the mold. Then you close the mold and you keep it, okay? Now, if you want to get the image, what will you do? Leave it in the mold or break the mold? You need to, while the mold is necessary, the ultimate understanding is to, afterwards, when you have developed, how to move it out and produce what is inside. Now, I think this is one great link between spiritual and education. So, you really cannot divide temporal education and spiritual education. They are kind of same in some way. One side. On the practical side, what if you put a lot of information in somebody's head and send them out like Frankensteins, who have no moral support, who don't know what to do, how to do? Imagine leaving irresponsible persons in charge of nuclear power and teach them how to press the button. So, the other side of spirituality is to stress on the humanity side of our life. And in this, while the ancient Vedas have talked about it, one of the most important things in the Vedas is Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha. May the whole world be happy. Sarve Santu Niramaya. Let there be the whole world does not suffer. Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu. May the whole world see that which is auspicious. Ma kaschit dukhapat bhavet. Let there be no pain for anyone. What a universal statement. And then you have, on the other hand, a man who walked in the streets of Jerusalem years ago, who didn't even have a place to stay. He himself says on record, the foxes have dens and the snakes have holes, but the Son of Man knows not where to lay his head. Today he would be called homeless guy. But in India, this homeless is not a bad word. Gita says a yogi is aniketa, one who doesn't have a house. Wherever he stays is his house. And this great person said a couple of things which reflect, which show that in any part of the world there can be spiritual understanding. It need not necessarily be only from one part. Well, India, we have this additional advantage that when others were looking for technology and other things, many of us in India, many of the rishis, were exploring into the inner. So there is that advantage. But it's there everywhere. And what did this man say? I hope you know the name. I don't have to say the name. A couple of things. He said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." Not somebody who belongs to a community. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. And the other, lay treasures in your heart where thieves do not break in and steal. Now this is a purely Vedantic thought. Deep down in the essence of our being, there is joy. We look for it everywhere. Don't find it because we don't look within. So, and for this, the most important thing is to understand yourself properly, not by sitting down and closing your eyes, but under all circumstances. There are people who say we practice, what is that called? There's a very common word used nowadays. Awareness? No. Mindfulness. Yeah. Every day I sit down for 10 minutes and mindfulness. Mindfulness is not just sitting down and closing your eyes and being mindful of your thoughts. That's part of it, of course. Mindfulness is to mind yourself and see how you behave in the outside world. After sitting down and saying, oh, I am all peace, or go out and shout at my driver, then what mindfulness do I have? It's a double life. Inside I'm something, outside I'm something else. This is not the integrated life that one would lead if one claims to be spiritual. So, for that, Babaji, my teacher, used to always say, suppose you meditate in a cave for 30 years, 10 hours a day, okay? And then you say, now I'm free of anger. You know the famous statement, bless them that curse you. Not easy to practice, but perhaps there were people who did. Suppose you sit there and you say, now I'm free of anger, no revenge, and no jealousy. You know, jealousy is such a strange thing. It's one of the most peculiar things that one can think of. Nothing happens to me. Somebody is happy and I'm unhappy. God knows for what. It's a very strange thing, and it's so difficult to cure. Again, I have to go back to my state where I was born. Malayalam, we have a saying, Kashandikkum kushumbinu marinilla. No medicine for baldness, and so don't believe all those ads about growing hair. It doesn't work. Anyway, so you can waste money and come back home. Yeah, so if I say, in this cave for 30 years, I've meditated for 10 hours, I'm free of... I said, who are you angry with in the cave? There's nobody there. Can you be jealous of the walls of the cave? Will you take revenge with the cave? For what? It's when you come out of there, get into a bus, somebody kicks you on the leg, especially with a stiletto heel, then you know where you stand. Am I really free of my anger? So mindfulness is not just sitting down and going inside and say, oh, I'm okay, hunky-dory. No. It's when you are in the outside world, how you treat people, how you behave with them. This is very, very important. If both of these things go together, then I'm studying myself. Since I've talked about many other religions and missed out on the Islam, at least let me tell you about something from the Sufis. There's a beautiful statement among the Sufis. Whether now it's followed or not, that's a different story. It says, Man arafa nafsu faqad arafa rabbu, which means he who knows his self, nafs, knows his Lord. Which means first you need to know yourself. What do you call that in Vedantic terms? Atmanivedana. Trying to find your own. So people think to know yourself means to close your I am the Brahman. You're not, man. You're eating, drinking, you're going to die. You have to first find out where you stand, how you behave with people, what are you, before you think of the Brahman. And if you find yourself and know where you stand, then you move towards that which is supreme. First we have to understand ourselves carefully. If you don't understand, how can you remove the impurities and the distractions which are in us? So it's very important. I think that is the third point. I would say education is also to know yourself properly in relationship with the outside world. And therefore behave properly. You may be angry with somebody, but that's no way to solve the problem. Plus, physiologically, anger only heightens your blood pressure, it doesn't do anything. There's a great founder of the Lingayats in Karnataka. His name is Basaveshwara. It's a beautiful statement in his Vachanas. He says, if you're angry, you're just burning your own house, nothing happens to the neighbor. So why should we burn our house down? Can't we handle things in a different way? Therefore, that is where teachings of great teachers comes, where I say, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you. You would say this is not easy. If I say, do good to them, to the auto rickshaw driver who's charging double what he should be charged. I understand practically, but have no hatred. Sometimes you might have to pretend. So, I have a little more time. It's going to be 1 hour. I'll tell you a story of practical life. Now, this is a story, so there may be some exaggerations. All stories have exaggeration. I always tell people, suppose Rama was born in Ayodhya. He was a son of Dasharatha. Sita was taken away by Ravana. Rama went and brought Sita back. There's no story there. But when Valmiki, the Adi Kavi, wrote the Ramayana, he did it in such a way that even today we listen to this story with great attention. In fact, it's very interesting. My son-in-law's grandfather was the first person who immortalized the Ramayana in the series, Ramananda Sagar. The Ramayana used to come, parliamentarians used to bunk parliament and watch the Ramayana. It's all because of Adi Kavi, Valmiki, and later on Tulsidas, of course. So, yeah, story. Everybody likes stories. I also like it. So, this is a story told by Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Ramakrishna Mission is close by, I think. Apparently, there was a street in which there was a very dangerous snake. Nobody could walk on the streets. So one day a brahmachari, you know what a brahmachari, itinerant spiritual seeker, let's define it that way, came. And he was going toward the street and everybody said, don't go there, there's a dangerous cobra out there, is going to kill you. So he said, don't worry about me. I know how to handle cobras, I have my incantations. I said, okay. So he went and the cobra came out. Please, it's a story. Huh? Here the cobra might speak, so don't worry. And the cobra came out and the brahmachari said to the cobra, hey, why are you leading a life like this? You can't bite me, I know how to stop you. But why are you leading? Why can't you become a good fellow? He said, what should I do for that? He said, I can give you a mantra, chant it regularly. Okay, what else? You cannot bite anybody. He said, okay. He was so impressed by the yogi, by the brahmachari, he decided. So he gave him the mantra and he said, no biting. That's what you said, condition. Well, several years passed. The brahmachari came back. He found that the street was fully occupied by urchins, street boys, playing marbles, no fear. So he said, where is the snake which was here, my disciple? He said, oh, that fellow, well, he stopped biting, do you know that? He said, oh, really? Yeah. And then, so we broke his backbone, he's inside the hole somewhere. Go find him. So the brahmachari went and called him by name. Hey, he said, Guruji, I am here. So what happened? Well, I stopped biting, you said not to bite. Stopped biting and the boys broke my backbone. I can't even move. So the yogi said, man, I'll cure you. Don't worry about that. He took him out, cured him of his back and so on and said, what kind of an idiot are you? I told you not to bite. Did I tell you not to hiss? What do you mean? So in this life sometimes we have to hiss. But don't really bite. But then very soon people discover that you are not the biting type. They take you for a ride. You have to be careful. Oh, I have it several times. But then, see, what is more important? To keep people in peace and happiness than the small little bites that you get sometimes. So, this is the link between practical life and the spiritual. I am myself a married man. I am not a monk. I think a married life is a wonderful thing, especially to trim your ego. You learn many things. You think, I've all gone, finished in no time, you're fine. Well, she's a good girl, but because this is live, might be seen in the school. Uh, so what I mean to say is the main thing is to understand yourself, realize that there is a vast potential in us, especially the young. Don't condition yourself to think I can do only this much. Remove all the coverings that bog you down. And these are usually negative emotions, revenge, anger. You think that you're doing a good thing, but actually they bog you down. They're dead weight. Remove them and see how free you are like butterflies. So, this is my message. I know in 1 hour this is all the topic that you can cover. I think I have touched many points which are important. So, thank you very much. We leave it at that. As Dr. Salim Thomas said, there is some time for questions. I don't know if I can answer because until I hear the questions, I can't tell you if I can answer them. If I can't, I'll say I don't know. One of the most difficult things to do because everybody thinks they know everything. I don't. So, we are open to these questions. I don't know how you're going to do it, whether there's a microphone. Sir.
Excuse me.
They can't hear.
Hello. Lower. Okay. Now, I have a question. You said that the most important thing is to get your inner being to go into it. And from what you said, you can almost do nothing because your mind will be cluttered. Therefore, the only thing you can do is sit in a cave, as you said, and meditate. And you'll probably get to your inner mind because I can't see any flash of lightning hitting me and getting into my inner mind. So, do you think that it is necessary to isolate oneself from the world and do pure meditation so that you have nothing cluttering your mind? Would you say that?
Let me put it this way. While periods of solitude may be good and even essential sometimes, in all religious disciplines, people have gone into retirement, not retiring their work, but retreats, and spend some time in solitude. So, while short periods or a little longer periods of solitude might be important, what you gain in that solitude should be useful for you when you come out of that solitude. You can't sit ever in solitude. So, if you go into solitude, you should train your mind to be in solitude in the midst of everything. This is important, not just the physical solitude. You know what I mean? So, this training is what is called meditation, where you learn how to not allow your mind to wander around and waste energy, but to calm down. So that treasure is in your heart. Lay treasures in your heart, where thieves do not break in and steal. But when you come out, don't let the thief steal it away. Live in such a way that you feel and keep it as a treasure in yourself. Definitely, periods of solitude are essential. No question.
Good evening, sir. I have a question for you. So,
tell me your name, please.
My name is Udhav. Udhav.
Uda.
Yeah. My parents keep taking me to talks about spirituality and religion and all these various things, and I've never understood how I would use it in my life, for example. So I wanted to ask you, what's the purpose of your life? But more importantly, how has spirituality helped you to achieve your purpose or get towards your purpose, rather?
First of all, your one question you asked in the middle, which is, what is the purpose of life? Let's start with that. Right. I'm sure different people, if you ask different people, they'll say we have different purposes in life. right? But all the different purposes in life have one common agenda or one common aim. And what is that? Happiness. Right? Right or wrong? Who wants to go towards sorrow? No. Even people who commit suicide do that because they want to end sorrow. So, the movement towards happiness is the purpose of life. And for that, we like to expand our horizons, to know more, to acquire more. But you're a young man, you should do that. But at the same time, you must understand that the happiness that you seek may not come if you have 3 Mercedes Benzes in your car shed. It may come, I'm not saying you shouldn't have. I like cars, I drive cars, that's not the problem. The thing is not to think that externally you can reach the satisfaction which you seek. You cannot. So, what can be the other alternative? To seek happiness, which is the aim of life. I want to become a scientist because I want to be happy. That's the way I want to be. So, to understand that it is not so much the outside but the inside. This is how spirituality and education are connected and reality are connected. That one realizes that what you seek is not so much in the outside world. If you have everything in the outside world and if your mind is not balanced, it's tortured. In fact, I sometimes find people who have lots of physical material wealth who are more tortured than the small village shopkeeper. I'm not saying you should become a village shopkeeper. You know what I mean. So it's a state of mind that is important, not so much what you acquire around yourself. So while you should acquire, you're a young man, you should move forward. You know why we move forward? Because actually, in true essence, this is a spiritual teaching, I'm telling you. We come from completeness. And now we have become conditioned. And we're trying to go back to that completeness. This journey, there's this Purnamada, Purnamidam, that is complete. Purnamidam, this is also complete, but we don't see the completeness. We are incomplete. Therefore, we want to complete ourselves by doing various things. Right? Now you should remember that in truth, inside you, there is a potential which is complete. And therefore, when you move towards completion, you should also keep in mind the fact that the mind matters, not just the material achievements. And if the mind matters, and if you know how to keep your mind in tip-top condition, materially also you can improve. This is the connection. You cannot leave this world and run away. But while living in this world, if you can bring in a little bit of discipline into your hearts, into your minds, then your life becomes much more happy and easy to live in. This is the connection. I have not answered your question fully. I have given you food for thought. Think about it. If you meet me again, come out with more questions. Yes, ma'am.
So I get my turn. Good evening, sir. It was a wonderful session, quite enlightening.
Thank you.
I have one question. How do you incorporate it in education? I mean, we all, as we grow older, we kind of realize it. Sometimes we want to impart it to our children. How do we really do it, and at what stage, and what's the right methodology? Some help over there.
Well, first, the father and mother, the parents, should inculcate these things in their own lives. There's no point in inculcating something to the children if we are not practicing it. Because the children know us so well. You can fool the world, you cannot fool the kids because they can look through all our hypocrisies. So, when people come to our school, they say, what do we teach the children? I said, you lead your life and the children will learn from you. So the first step is that I should myself, if I am a parent, I'm a parent myself. Now they're all married and gone, but still, I have to lead a life of inquiry, not just the material world, but give value to other things. If the children see it from a young age, not push them into it. There is a danger that they might recoil, it might recoil. Instead of that, you lead a life. They look at you and they say, seems to be good, why don't we do it? I think that's the way to do it. And more than this is part that the parents can play. I think the teachers play a very important role in this. If the teachers can inculcate in their own lives this kind of internal understanding, then it somehow goes to the students, even if they don't actively ask them to do it. The children say, what is this that this teacher has that attracts me to them? Then they start thinking. And then you tell them, look, this is what I am. Maybe it's this that attracts you to me. This wonderful thing about the mind is when there are certain understandings in the mind and when you have certain experiences, then the mind acts like a big magnet, and any iron piece that comes near feels a little bit of that magnetic influence. The only thing you need to do is make sure that the rust has been removed. If there is rust, then the magnet doesn't act. So, turning away the rust, scraping it off, is the meaning of spiritual life. Actually, you're a magnet, but you're covered by it. So, when you lived a life like that, then when the teachers are like that, then the students automatically understand, imbue, absorb what you are. And I think it should start at a young age.
Guruji, good evening. My name is Naveen.
There are some sounds coming. First I thought my kundalini was going up.
Could you give us, the layman, some advice that we could follow day to day? Just some simple things that we could do to try and reach this mindfulness that we talked about, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Here is something. First, theoretically understand your potential and don't limit it in any way. Spiritual potential. Two, find some time every day where you can free yourself from other activities and do self-introspection. Earlier, the better in the morning because you're still not disturbed by the outside world. Sit down somewhere quietly. And before you start, bow down a few times and touch your head to the ground. You don't have to bow down to anybody in particular. Bow down to the earth for giving us food. Also, psychologically, if you bow down, the circulation of blood in your head increases. You can be calmer and sharper. All the time, I will not bow down to anybody. The blood circulation is going down. Bow down. If you don't want to bow down to somebody, shut the door inside the room and bow down a few times. Or do Sarvangasana. Head down, legs up posture. Okay? So what I'm trying to say is pick some time. And during that time, don't do anything else. Put up a board saying if the house burns down, don't call me. Don't play golf. Don't take your dog for a walk. Don't play badminton. You can, but not at this time. Separate this time and keep it. And then sit down. Then, if there's something simple to do, yes, first thank the earth for what you are now, your parents for what you are now, if you have a teacher for what you have gained in humility. Then say, I need to go into the depths of my heart where the deity shines inside my heart. We have a nice expression, antaryami, one who sits inside. That is your divine self. So close your eyes, go deep within, Now there is a simple spiritual yogic exercise which I can give it to you. It's expensive. You go and ask somebody else, you might have to write a check. But I'm going to tell you. Sit down quietly, close your eyes, and watch your breath. See what happens? The mind cannot remain calm without being attached to something. So usually it is attached to the outside world. Objects, thoughts, desires. You can't say, I want to stop this and make my mind calm. The mind cannot remain in a vacuum. So what do I do? Turn it into something internal which it can link itself to. And that is the breath. So close your eyes, carefully watch your breath. Okay? Now, watching your breath means, your breath is one of the most important things in life. From the time you're born till you die, you're breathing. You can live without food sometime. You can live without water for some time. You cannot live without breath for half a minute. If it stops, you're dead. In Gujarat, they say off ho gaya, finished. In Kerala, we say pancharai. So, if it stops, you're done. And the breath is so important, and yet we don't give any attention to it. We don't even know how to breathe properly, generally. When you say breathing, you surface breathe. So, sit down, bow down, say thanks to everybody, send messages of love to even your enemies, if you have any. Close your eyes, watch your breath, which means as you inhale, give complete attention to the inhalation. As you exhale, give complete attention to the exhalation. Do this attention, it's similar to Vipassana actually. Give complete attention to the breathing in and breathing out for 10 minutes full. Don't do anything else. After that, if you have been taught a mantra by your parents or you have learned somewhere, chant that for 5 minutes. If you know Gayatri, chant that for 5 minutes. If you know some other prayer, Father, we thank Thee for the night and for the blessed morning light. Chant something. Then bow down again and say thank you. This will take you 15 minutes. Do that every day for at least 2 months before you go into anything more complicated. But at this point, if you introduce anything too complicated, you will give up in 2 weeks. Not you, I don't know about you, but generally. So, I think this is a very practical way of leading this. Look, I lead a very busy life. Not for myself, but I lead a very busy life. I travel a lot, I talk, I go here, I go there, I hold workshops. But inside there is a part of me which is calm and quiet and tranquil. And the Gita calls it Sthita Prajna. I'm not claiming I'm a Sthita Prajna, but where the mind is calm in the midst of all circumstances. So this is one step practical to develop this mindset. But do it every day. Why every day? Because the mind has got itself into a pattern for many years. To change that pattern, you need to practice regularly. Food for thought. Thank you.
Sir, what about forgiveness in religion? Because you've not spoken about it, but seems to be certain religions don't talk about forgiveness at all. You talk about revenge. Even at a very young age, you're taught about revenge. You're taught about, but forgiveness is never spoken about in a very serious manner. That's one thing. Second thing is, what does one need to recognize as inner self? You automatically have your inner self. You don't need to recognize an inner self.
Say that again. I didn't get what you said.
No,
Second.
The second one is, why do you need to recognize your inner self? You're what you are because of your inner self. It's not something which needs to be expanded or recognized, right? And the last thing I want to tell Mr. George, I disagree with you. He comes for golf, he plays one round with Jacob, he'll have total solitude and total, nirvana.
I didn't completely get what you said, but I'm trying to sort it out.
You're not the first one, sir. You won't be the last.
Thank you very much. So, about playing golf, if you can play golf and attain nirvana, that's wonderful. I have no objections to that. I play too, so I know. Uh, to the first question, no, second question, why should we find ourselves? Well, if you really think you know yourself, then there is no need to find it. Unfortunately, many people are still searching for it. The identity crisis is over 2000 years old. We really don't know who we are: husband, wife, son, father, golf player, worker, boss. We don't know really. So we are saying that in us there is one essence which is the core of our consciousness. When I say to find that, that's what I meant. We all know that we have different roles, we play different roles, but in spite of that, there is an essence in us which, if you don't feel like discovering, it's up to you. But if you really feel like discovering, there are ways and means to do that. Then, about forgiveness, I think that it is a very important part of one's spiritual life to be to forgive, to forget and forgive. Because we live years not being able to forgive something that somebody has done to us many years ago. You know, suppose somebody has slapped me 20 years ago. The slap is over. When? One day, maximum. If it was a hard slap, I might have lost a tooth, so it may be a few days. But it is finished. But I will not let it go. It keeps inside my mind playing like a tape again and again. This fellow slapped me. Why? I need to slap him back, even after 20 years. Actually, there is no slap. There is only the thought of it playing constantly like a tape recorder inside my head. I'm saying, can we throw it out one day from the window and say, it's done? Can we move forward? This is what I meant. And it's very important, I agree with you. Forgiveness, forget and forgive is a very important part of what, even you can't usually normal people go to the extent of bless them that curse you. But at least you can say, it's okay, let's move forward. Relationships improve actually when we say, it doesn't matter. It's something in the past, it doesn't exist now. Can we move forward? Thank you.
Guruji, I have a question. My name is Ashok. I'm a dentist. I will fix the tooth for you, don't worry.
Where are you? Okay. I haven't lost one, thank you.
My question is, why follow the mind when you're in the right place?
Sir? Say that again.
Why follow your mind when you have the heart in your right place?
If you have your heart in the right place, you're already a saint. You don't have to follow your mind. Seriously. And if you have your heart in the right place, I hope there is somebody in the heart.
Plenty.
Then you don't have to do anything.
Hello. My question is, with the current education system, where children are being competitive and working towards exams and exams and exams, and the stress of being, number one, and they're already cluttered in their brain, as you said, overfull from their cup. How do you help them be spiritual or creative when there's no space for anything else?
You don't have to help them to become spiritual. I think the way of education should change in such a way that it's not merely collecting information and stuffing it into the brain, but rather how to make the mind grow creatively. You don't have to make them spiritual. If the mind becomes creative and grows, it learns how to be kind and compassionate. It's already spiritual. Spiritual need not necessarily mean even belief in a creator God. Even without that, one can be spiritual. The Buddhists have no God. Shunya. Nirvana is Shunya. But there are many good Buddhists. There are beautiful people. So, what you can do is, as a small introduction, you can't take them out completely from the system. Then they'll fail in this world that we have before us. You can't do that. Meanwhile, along with that, try to inculcate practices and thoughts in their minds which give place, a space in the mind. Like music, dance, something which is sensual, connected with the sense organs, but in which people are fully involved and where they can let themselves go. I think if you can start, I'm sure many schools have that potential, but if that potential can be exploited to the maximum, then perhaps while they are in the system, they also will learn to survive without getting caught up, without getting overcrowded in their minds. So we need to do that. I'm sure that you're doing it, I don't know, but it is Sishya, so you must be doing it in some way. I was a Shishya myself of a teacher, and this is what my teacher taught me. I don't have any Shishyas now, I have only friends. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anyway, next time if I come here, I'm a little disappointed. I would like all questions from the young students. Yeah? Okay. Sorry. Okay, now it's 8 o'clock. So, shall I go? Yes. Thank you very much.
Stay here, sir. Stay here, sir.